I believe that everybody has a story, and I'm fascinated to hear them. So come with me as we take a walk down Fascination Street. Welcome back, Streetwalkers. This episode is with Kimberly Ewertz. Kimberly is the author of the brand new book Family Redefined, which just came out last weekend. In this episode, we get to know Kimberly. She tells us some sweet stories about her parents and their love. And then we meander a little bit. Finally, we get into her book, why she wrote it, what she hopes to get out of it. So I recommend that you all flock to buy this book. You can buy it everywhere, online, every place, and the website that she gives during the episode. So enjoy, folks. This was recorded during all the self-distancing due to the coronavirus outbreak. So if that is over by now, woohoo. If not, damn it. But either way, this is my conversation with author Kimberly Ewertz.
Yeah, talk to me, yeah.
Welcome to Fascination Street Podcast, Kimberly Ewertz. How are you doing today, Kimberly?
I'm doing fine, Steve. How are you doing?
I am Wonderflonium. Can I call you Kim, or do you prefer Kimberly?
Kim is fine.
That'll make this episode a lot shorter if I don't have to say Burley a million times.
Yeah. I only heard Kimberly growing up when my mom was mad at me, so Kim is much better.
That is so weird because when I was growing up, every time I would get in trouble, my mom would also call me Kimberly. How weird.
You're so funny.
Thank you.
And I listened to a number of your podcasts already, and I love your style. You make people feel comfortable, and that's wonderful. You're very good at this.
Thank you. Which ones did you listen to pat myself on the back?
Just yesterday, I listened to 3 of them. The one that stood out the most to me was Ed Asner. I just love him, always have, since Mary Tyler Moore. I know you interviewed him twice, but I only listened to the Junkman one, and I bought the book because of your podcast.
Oh, how sweet.
No, it really did. It drew me in, not only your questions, but your comments about how the book wasn't long enough. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. And Bill, an author that wrote for children, I think you interviewed him in June of this year. He's putting out installments of this series on audible.com and Amazon. Bill something. I'm sorry.
Will Blaine.
Yes. And there was another gentleman. He had leukemia when he was a child, and then he wrote a book about Dan Marino and somebody else. I'm not a sports person.
Right.
But it was still interesting. But the one on Ed Asner, I just loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Very cool. Well, thank you. It was a great honor to get to speak to Ed, not once, but twice. And the second time, it was at his request. So that was really cool.
Oh, that must have made you feel like I'm floating on air. Ed Asner wants to talk to me again.
I'm not going to lie. My eyes did well up when I heard that. I was like, holy moly. But the guy who had leukemia as a kid and then became a coach and stuff, his name is Joe Lafferty.
Yes, and you interviewed him twice, but I only listened to the first part. I was going to listen to the second part today. Gotcha.
It was actually just a one interview. It was just so long. I put it into 2 parts. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, you broke it up.
Yeah, part 1 and part 2. Kim, I like to start with some softballs. I like to help everybody get to know the guest.
I'm really bad at sports.
Yes. So let's talk about your time as a professional baseball player.
It was brief, let me tell you.
It was brief. Kim, can you tell everybody where you grew up? Where were you born and raised?
Oh, sure. I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, as we called it, Misery. And I lived in the city, always in apartments. My parents never were able to afford a house, but they were always nice apartments. And I was the only child. My parents were older when they had me. And unfortunately, I lost my dad when I was 17.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
Well, it's not okay. So you're an only child and they had you later in life?
Yes, they met and married later in life.
Okay, so they met each other later in life. Was
yes.
that their first marriage?
It was. Yeah, for both of them.
How quaint.
I know. I think my dad had always assumed he was going to be a lifelong bachelor. And then he met my mom, and I guess she made a really good impression on him because they were married 2 years before I was born.
Oh, cool. Did they stay married for the rest of his life?
Yes, they were married when he passed. They were coming up on their 20th anniversary.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So you don't know this about me because we are only just now meeting, but I am a sucker for a love story. Can you tell me how they met? Do you know how they met?
I honestly don't. That's terrible. I feel terrible that I don't.
Well, that's okay.
I wish I had a good story for you, Steve. I can tell you that my dad treated my mom like a queen. He would wash her hair. She never had to wash her own hair.
How does that work? Did she have a lot of hair?
She had the normal amount, and he would set the chair up at the kitchen sink and just wash her hair there so that she didn't have to do it. And he did all the housework, although he worked a full-time job. She did the laundry. That's about it.
That is going to make me cry. That is the sweetest thing.
Yeah, now I'm going to cry. He was amazing, and he was my best friend. I didn't need brothers or sisters. I had my dad. And we would go fishing together and do all kinds of outdoor activities because my mom wanted to always stay inside. She was like a hermit.
Really?
So him and I were buddies, and we palled around, and I loved him dearly. Still do. Talk to him every day.
Oh, my gosh. So outside of the home, it was really just you two, right? Because mom would stay home, and
Exactly.
and then you two would just go tearing up to town, fishing and whatnot?
Yeah, exactly. You know, we didn't have a car. I know it sounds like unbelievable, but we didn't.
Oh, I have a lot of questions about that, but please continue.
Neither of them drove. I don't know why my dad never got a license, and after he passed, my mom finally decided that we needed to get a car because we didn't have him to be our protector when we, were standing at the bus stops and stuff. So she got her license. Within a few weeks, she ran into like an auto repair shop. She went up the ramp, the driveway, and she crashed into their doorway. I'm sorry, it shouldn't be funny, but it was. And she never drove again.
That's hilarious. Well, since you're laughing, that means nobody was hurt.
Yeah, no, she was not hurt at all. She was mad as hell, and that was it. She quit driving after that. So I became the driver.
That's funny. And by then you were old enough to drive, right?
Yeah, I was 17 when he passed. So I was definitely old enough. I took driver's ed in school, squeaked by and passed it, and I was a terrible driver that first year.
Sweet. Everybody is.
Yeah.
Every kid that I know, like including both of my kids, but every kid that's their age, my kids are almost 30 now, but when they got their license, they had friends all the same age, everybody in school.
Right.
And within the first year, there was 0 people in their circle that had not crashed a car.
Okay,
Every single one of them. Yeah.
Okay, good.
But let's talk about your family. How is it that your parents were older in their life? One would presume that they would have been, I guess, financially secure. Why were they not able to buy a home or a car?
I know why my dad wasn't. The bizarre thing is, I was 17 when my father passed, and my dad was 17 when his father passed. And he had 4 sisters and a mother who was an invalid. I never found out what she had because she died in January the year that I was born in December. So she died at the beginning of the year. I was born the end of the year. So I never had the opportunity to meet her. I only saw pictures of her in their wedding photo album. But his father had taught him that since he was the man of the house, he must always take care of the ladies. So he went to work, didn't finish school, was the breadwinner of the house. And he continued to be until, I guess, all the sisters had married. And then he was, by that time, just a bachelor on his own. As far as I knew, he worked at a place called the Bleachery, which was like a factory kind of job, and he would come home kind of all soiled and dirty. Never complained about it, but that's where he worked until he lost that job when I was maybe like, I want to say 9 or 10, And then he got a job at a local bank, and he was like a guard, and then he moved his way up to the point where he was in charge of security for the safety deposit department, and that's the job he continued in until he passed away. So he never had big paying jobs, but they were always able to manage. I mean, as far as I knew, we were fine.
Well, I mean, that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Well, very cool.
So I don't know if that answered your question.
It actually did answer my question,
Okay,
so thank
good.
you. I was super curious because, the goal is, at least what we're told and what we're trying to teach our kids is to sort of don't have a kid at 17, have a kid at 30 when you're on your feet a little better.
Right, and more secure.
Yeah. So, for those listening, Kim and I met through a mutual friend, previous two-time guest of the show, Seth Harwood. How do you know Seth?
I met Seth through Stanford University. They had offered writing workshops in the evening, and he was one of the teachers that offered a workshop. And that's probably been close to 15 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So before I signed up for the class, I, did a Google search of Seth Harwood, what kind of writing he did, and I found his book on short stories, A Long Way from Disney, and I ordered it and read it and fell in love with his writing and said, yeah, I want this guy to teach me how to write. So signed up for his first workshop, and after that ended, he offered a number of us outside of class. He gathered us and said, I am willing to offer you guys additional mentorships and tutoring outside of the school if you want to meet privately. That way we didn't have to pay the Stanford prices. So I hope it's okay to say that. So, of course I was 100% in on that. So I did that for a number of years. And so he's always been my mentor and kind of just helped guide me in being a better writer. And he helped me in the beginning stages of the book that I've recently written. So I owe him a lot.
Oh, cool.
He introduced me to you.
Oh,
so
sweet.
I owe him even more.
Well, I also owe him lots. Back in 2004, I think. Yeah, I think it was 2004.
Oh, wow.
I was working at a bank, and I was not customer facing. I was sort of back office kind of guy. And
Sure.
I could listen to whatever I wanted to, since I wasn't in front of people. I mean, I had headphones on. But
Yeah.
there was this new thing called podcasting.
Yes. And he was right there.
Yeah, I stumbled on him. He would podcast his fictional novels. He would do, chapter by chapter or whatever, and I was enthralled.
Yeah.
The first one I listened to was A Long Way from Disney.
Yeah, that's a short story collection. That's the one I found. Yeah.
It's a collection of short stories,
Loved
and
it.
one of the stories, a couple of the stories in there reminded me of my childhood, but one in particular reminded me of my childhood.
Okay.
So much so that I reached out to him, and we have been, sort of, I guess, correspondent friends ever since.
Wow. That's amazing.
He's actually written me into a couple of his books, so that's cool.
Oh, wow. I had no idea. That is cool.
He's the greatest, and, without him definitely leading the way, I don't think that I'd be podcasting to this day. He got me hooked on podcasting, yeah.
In a way, he was your mentor, too.
And also, I took one of those classes that you mentioned.
Yeah, because he teaches online, too.
Yeah, so I joined one of those groups, I think only for one round or whatever. I wish I was a better writer, which is why I started to do it, but I just don't think that's in the cards for me.
Well, you're so good at what you're doing now, so don't worry about it.
You're so sweet. So, at some point, you decided you wanted to become a writer.
Yeah, I did.
Tell me how that path started for you. Like, what did you want to be when you grew up?
A mom.
Yeah?
Yeah, first and foremost, I always wanted to just grow up and have, my family. I wanted to be a mom.
Nailed it.
I did. I have a wonderful son. He's 40 now. He lives in LA, and there I go, tearing up. Yeah. He's my, he's the inspiration for the book that I've written, and he's my everything.
Well, we're going to get to the book in just a little bit longer. I'm going to make
sure.
everybody wait
No.
a little bit longer. But I love how we keep teasing it.
Hey, Streetwalkers, here's a word from our sponsors.
Hi, guys. I'm Vinny Tartarich. I'm the guy that has the Fitness Confidential podcast and the book by the same name. I've started a few companies, but I just started a company called NSNG Foods, and our first product is Ultra Fat. What's that? You say fat? Oh, yeah. It's got fat in it. It's got ultra fat. And the reason we call it ultra fat is because it also has electrolytes. So this is something you want to take when you're on the move. Taking the nation and the world by storm. We have the coffee almond with coconut and vanilla. We also have the one with coconut, vanilla, and almonds with no coffee. So you can go check it all out, nsngfoods.com. Now go listen to my good friend Steve Owens because he knows what he's talking about.
Let's get back into it.
So at what point did you decide that you wanted to become a writer? Is this the first thing you've written?
Oh, no, I've been a freelance journalist for 25 years, I guess it is now.
What preempted that? Like what?
Yeah, well, I lost my job. I was let go at the bank, and that was my full-time job. I always, out of high school, I started working at a bank and just stuck with banking because that's all I had as far as experience, and just kept moving up into different banks throughout the years. And at one point after my divorce, I met someone and we moved in together. He is now my husband, and he's the good one. And when we were together, before we got married, we lived together for a while because, once you divorce, you don't want to make that same mistake again. So you're very gun shy. And I lost my job at the bank, and he said, well, why don't you take time and, you've always wanted to go to college. I never went to college because of my dad passing away. I just didn't have that opportunity. And I did. I enrolled in full time because I wanted to study journalism, and they only offered it during the day. So I was never able to take it, as an evening course. So I started at the community college, Merrimack Community College in Kirkwood, Missouri. Shout out to Merrimack. And in taking a journalism class, they want you to write for the school newspaper. So I started doing that, and I had a freaking blast doing that. I was just love the idea of talking to people and finding out their stories and being able to put those stories out there and let other people know about them, kind of shine a spotlight on the people that deserved it,
Hey, wait a minute. That's what I do.
You do. Isn't it fun?
It's so much fun.
It's fulfilling too, right?
Very. And it's a gateway to meeting all sorts of people. Really cool people. I've made a lot of friends doing this.
Yeah, so that just kind of blossomed into oh my God, I enjoy doing this. Then my teacher said, the local newspapers hired he called them stringers, but they're freelancers. And so I started checking in with the local paper in Kirkwood and Kirkwood Times. Shout out, Kirkwood Times. And they hired me, and I started writing for them, and then I've been doing that ever since.
What kind of pieces were you writing for them?
It was always feature articles. It was always about either people in the community or events in the community that were taking place, or celebrations or anniversaries. But majority, I would say 80% of the time, it was highlighting people. So, you get to meet all these people. And yeah, I had no idea that was something I could get paid to do. And it all came about because I lost my job, and my then boyfriend said, you should go to school. And I did. And it just opened a whole nother doorway for me. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And I love it. Absolutely love it. Except because of COVID, all of my freelance opportunities have kind of dried up. So, but they'll open up again.
Yeah, I have a previous guest, JP Emerson. He is a freelance writer for automotive magazines and websites, and same story. Yeah, with COVID, it's all gone, at least for now. So,
just for now, it's temporary.
All right. So, you have a book.
I do. It's called Family Redefined: Childhood Reflections on the Impact of Divorce.
What is this book about? Family Redefined, that could mean a multitude of things. We are in the process of redefining what is a nuclear family currently.
Yes.
But that's not what this book is about, right?
No. That's why there's the subtitle of Childhood Reflections on the Impact of Divorce, because there are 10 chapters in the book, and each one highlights a testimonial of an adult child of divorce, looking back and just reflecting on how their parents' divorce impacted their lives and the choices they've made, and continues, all throughout their life to be really a motivating factor of everything they do. It's always there. It's always a part of them. It's an imprint on their life that they never are without. So I myself had a 10-year-old son when I divorced, and I never, ever expected it to have such a negative impact on him, because I knew I was taking us out of an abusive relationship from an abusive person. And so how could that be a bad thing? And it turned out it was like a death to my son. The family he always knew was no longer. And that is really, sorry, I get emotional. That is really impactful on a child. They need their parents more than ever. And parents going through a divorce are in the midst of their own crisis. So it's really hard to focus on a child and what they need. So I just felt if parents that are going through that now or considering it or have gone through it could read what these children have experienced and how now as adults looking back and reflecting on all that, it would help guide them and give them hopefully a resource and a tool to utilize to benefit their children. The main goal of this book was just to help the kids out there now.
So your son was 10 when you got a divorce from his father?
Yes.
And he's 40 now.
He is. Yeah, it took me a while to get there.
Please take this in the spirit in which it is intended, which is all in good fun. What in the hell took you so long? Why'd you wait 30 years to write this book?
There's no good answer for it. I think I had to process the divorce itself in my own time. The main reason is because now that my son is an adult, we're able to really sit down and talk about everything that happened and how he's feeling about it. And that just kind of opened my eyes to, wouldn't this be helpful to others if, they understood while they were going through it rather than waiting decades after to have that conversation. If they could understand what their actions and sometimes the actions they don't take, how that is going to impact their child, if they know it now while they're going through it, maybe it can make a difference. And it's better to do it later than not at all.
Sure.
So it became a mission. And I started it 4 years ago. So.
Wow. This is a 4-year process.
Yeah, from conception to, completion. But it's been worth it. I feel it's worth it.
So you said 10 chapters, 10 people, 10 kids?
There's 10 individuals. The only one that is not an adult child looking back is chapter 10. And the only reason I included that is because the child herself was only 10 months old when her parents divorced. So the narrator is actually the mother. And that story is such a great positive example of how parents can do it right and do what's best for the child, even in the midst of a worst case scenario with her husband had an affair, and that's what led to their divorce. So if they can, get through all that and still put their child's welfare first, all parents can do that same thing. So I just felt that was a really good real-life example of how you can get through this.
That's the last chapter?
That is the last chapter, but there is a Q&A at the end of the chapters. The experts weigh in. So it's all the different marriage and family therapists that I interviewed that provided so much invaluable advice and direction on how to handle certain situations, from abandonment to relocation, from moving from, the family home to a new home, or sometimes kids have to move into 2 different homes because the family home is no longer there and each parent has a new place to live. And that transition, that distance transitioning, is so difficult for some kids. So all of the advice that they provided, I tried to kind of recap that in a Q&A format, question and answer, and provided all the different therapist advice in those answers, just as kind of like I said, a resource, a tool to kind of check and see, well, why is my child acting like this? Maybe that can give them some insight into their behavior. Most of the time, it's just a child that's acting out because they want their parents' attention. They just want that one-on-one connection. They're scared. They're so scared during that time, and they just want that connection with mom and dad.
I did have an opportunity to read a couple of the chapters. Thank you for that advanced screening, if you will.
Oh, well, thank you for reading.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure. I did notice one of the things that was a little bit, I think, unusual about the way that you're telling these stories is that you're having these, I guess, now grown-ups tell these stories about their experiences, and sometimes they're very specific, with events and circumstances surrounding their individual experiences. And I noticed that you intersperse those stories with either advice or explanations by professional counselors or family therapists or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool because it breaks it up. Some of these stories are pretty
powerful.
Powerful. That's a great word. Thank you. Some of these are very powerful.
Oh, and I just have to shout out to every single person that agreed to let me interview them and share these intimate stories of their childhood and their adulthood. They're my heroes. I just love each and every one of them.
Well, this is not the crying podcast, so knock it off.
Sorry.
Don't apologize. So they're very emotional stories. And so I think that breaking them up by inserting the advice or the explanation from the therapist, I think that was a good way to give you a little bit of a palate cleanser before you dive back into the rest of the story.
Right. Yeah.
And I guess my question is, with each individual story, did you take that to those therapists and counselors and say, what do you think about this? Or when you interviewed those therapists and counselors, were you able to take portions of what they said and apply it to the stories as you heard them?
Yes, exactly what you just said, the latter of the two. I went into each of the interviews with all the professional counselors and had, a laundry list of questions, trying to just cover as much as I could. And a few of them allowed me to re-interview them when I had certain situations. Like I said, this took 4 years, so I never knew who I was going to interview as far as the child of divorce. So I never knew what I was going to actually encounter in their stories. Sometimes a few of them, I realized I didn't get enough information from the counselors about stepchildren or stepfamilies or the impact that has on them. So then they were kind enough to let me re-interview them and kind of pinpoint certain questions that I knew I needed to have answers and insert that information into that individual's chapter. But the majority, I'd say 80% of the comments that are used all throughout the book came from the original questions. And I would read through all the notes and that definitely applies to chapter 1, that definitely applies to chapter 2, and just kind of divided it up that way, if that makes sense.
That makes 100% sense.
Okay.
And this is going to be a stretch, but it's sort of like when you would take those standardized tests or whatever, where you have to read the paragraph and then answer the questions about the paragraph.
Right.
I always did it backwards. I always read the question first and then looked for the answer in the paragraph.
Well, aren't you smart?
I guess. I mean, it sort of defeated the purpose because it was a reading comprehension test.
Yeah.
And so I guess
Yeah, but you found a way to beat the system. Good for you.
Thank you. I feel that that's sort of what you did, is that, you went and basically had all these answers, and then you would interview these children of divorce, and then you would get questions, and then you would have to apply those answers to those questions.
Yeah. I went in with the initial questions to counselors that came from, my conversations with my son and what he experienced. So I was talking to somebody who had gone through all of this and through what I learned from him, I had all these questions that I figured majority of children of divorce are experiencing all of these feelings and all of these situations. So those were kind of like the generalized questions. And sometimes there were certain situations, like I said, I never knew who the next one was going to be and what they were going to bring, to the table and share. And sometimes I hadn't thought of those situations, so I would need to go back and directly ask therapists about that particular kind of situation. Because including the comments of the therapist in each chapter, I'm hopefully providing that information to the parent reading that chapter that might apply to their situation. That's why in the beginning of the book on the table of contents, there's a brief summary of each chapter, because I figured that way if a parent only wants to read one chapter that applies to their certain situation, at least that chapter will help them and their children.
So you built this as sort of a guide, but also sort of a reference tool.
Exactly. Yeah, I did everything I could to try to make it that. Yeah. When I finished it and looked at it and read it for the 80 millionth time, it was like, this is what I would have wanted during the time that my son Tony was going through what he was going through. If I had only known, this book would have helped me. That was the whole reason behind it.
Got you.
Hey, Streetwalkers, here's a word from our sponsors.
Hi, I'm Erica.
And I'm Cassandra.
And we're the hosts of Trashy Trashy.
We're a podcast filled with trashy news stories and garbage people.
Did you leave the scene of an accident to go tanning?
Do you refer to wearing the strap down on your Crocs as sports mode?
Have you ordered Domino's online before they even open in the morning?
Are you switching the same AAA batteries from your TV remote to your vibrator instead of just buying more batteries?
Or are you normal?
Check us out wherever you download podcasts.
Let's get back into it.
Again, the book is called All in the Family, starring... No, wait. Tell me the name of the book again.
It is called Family Redefined, pause, Childhood Reflections on the Impact of Divorce.
I love the pause there. So, 10 chapters, 10 peoples. How did you go about finding these peoples?
These peoples. I just reached out to people that I knew in my community or people that I knew through other means and told them what my mission was, what my goal was, that this was a passion project. And I had researched other books on divorce, and I found that nothing out there really gave you the full story of a childhood divorce. You had some that had excerpts that children would give you quotes about how they felt when mom and dad would fight, even after the divorce or whatever their circumstances. But you never had an actual book that gave you from start to finish what that person went through from the time of their parents' divorce up until the age they are now. And I just felt by giving the parents out there a full vision of what that child is going through, that it would help give them a more clear picture of the choices that they're making now and how they can be long-lasting. So honestly, it was just through word of mouth, it was through friends, it was through family. That's where they all came from.
So 10 chapters, 10 peoples, 10 stories. Was there any stories that for whatever reason were not included? Like, did you talk to 15 people and only put 10 stories in the book? Or did you use every storyteller that you spoke with?
I had one individual who I interviewed even second. I went back for a second round of interviews because there were some gaps in his story and I wanted to fill those in. So after all of that, he reached out to me and said, I have changed my mind. I don't want my story shared. And so his is not in there per his request. And there's only one other person that I just didn't feel it gave a full, complete story, so I couldn't really include it. So those were the only two that weren't.
Gotcha. The 2 chapters that I read, those 2 people appear to be related siblings.
Yeah, brother and sister.
Are those the only siblings in the book?
Yes, they are. Yeah. And they are amazing people, and they have amazing and powerful and very sad stories. But to know where they are today and to know how successful they are and how happy and content with their lives they are now, and after you read what they've gone through, you just have so much respect for them. And I think the main thing about their story, which I hope is infused in each of the stories that are included in the book, not stories, but, testimonials, is the fact that hope is the driving force for each and every one of them. They persevered, they not only survived, but they thrived, and they always hoped for something better, and they got themselves through it.
The 2 chapters I read, the siblings, they seemed to me to have at a certain point lost hope because of some of the things that, happened in their stories, their experiences.
Yes, there were times when they did, but then one would help the other and they would get through it.
Yeah, I was going to say that by the end of each of those stories, those testimonials, I feel like they had either given each other or somehow found enough hope to keep going until things did get better. So, like I said, I've only read 2 of those chapters, but if the rest of the chapters are anything close to the 2 I read, this is going to be a phenomenal book. Well done, lady.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think each chapter is so unique from all the others. Each one stands out for different reasons, but they're all very powerful because they're true. They're people telling you how they felt when they were at the most vulnerable. And they were just so brave to share those stories for the betterment of parents and children, going through that. So, again, I thank them all.
Well, I'm sure that they appreciate that. Are you still in contact with all of these people?
Yes, I am.
Good.
Because I've tried to keep them updated as the book moved, because I was sure some of them, and especially the ones I interviewed in the early stages, they're like, well, she must have given up.
Or died.
We're not here. Yeah. Something. She fell off the face of the earth. And then I'd reach out and say, I'm at this stage, and then to actually be able to tell them I secured a publisher. We've got, a publishing date on the schedule, and it's coming out before the end of this year. So it actually is happening, people. So thank you again.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the release date. When is it slated to be released? I know that is a moving target and it might change,
yes.
But so far, if you can you tell me when is the release date?
According to my publisher, she's saying November 20th is when she will have the book available on, the online resources like Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And the publisher herself, Little Creek Press is what it's called, LCP, Little Creek Press and Book Design. They have their own website. They have a library there, and it'll also be for sale on there. And then once we confirm the cover, my husband is working on the website for the book, and you'll be able to order it online through there too.
Oh, okay, cool. Is this going to be a physical book? I know sometimes a lot of books are now just ebooks. Is this going to be ebook as well as a physical Dead Tree book?
Yeah, unfortunately it's a Dead Tree book, but I have a true passion for books, that you can hold in your hand. And I think it's important to be able to have this available to you, to just grab and carry with you if you need it. So yeah, it's coming out as a physical book, and I'm sure we're going to move from that point into the ebook, but we haven't discussed that yet.
How dare you say, unfortunately, it's a Dead Tree book? Dead Tree books are the best.
I think so. I do. Yeah, that's my preference.
Absolutely. The only thing better about those is that you can carry around 400 books.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you can load them up.
But I mean, come on. Who's reading 400 books all at the same time?
Yeah.
Not at the same time. You only need one, maybe two.
Yeah. Hats off to those who can read 400 books.
Well, yeah, there is that. So, Kimberly, this book is slated to come out November 20th of this year, plus or minus. These things change. Everything is fluid. I understand that. What do you hope that people get out of this book? I know that we've touched a little bit about why you wrote it, but what do you want the reader to gain or to glean from these pages and these experiences, these testimonials?
First and foremost, I want the parents that are reading this to know they're not alone, that there are so many that have gone through this before and come out. And included in the book, I put at the end of each chapter my thoughts. And it's just a little bit, a few paragraphs that I share that talk about my son and I and the journey that we have traveled over all these years together. And letting people know that, you know, you can come out of this and actually be stronger and more connected to your child than you were before it happened. So hang on to hope and hang on to faith that what you're doing is right and best for your child and for you, and you will get through it. That's my number one goal, is for the parents to know they're just not alone, that others have gone through this and they can too, and they can make it.
Sweet.
Yeah, so that's the main, if that's enough.
Oh, I think that's perfect. Now, I know I've kept you for a long time, but there's just a few things I want to, just some light housekeeping before we head out.
Okay.
Kimberly, are you on social media?
I'm on Facebook under my name, Kimberly Ewertz, and FamilyRedefinedTheBook.com.
Cool. So that's where everybody should go?
Yeah, that's where everybody should go.
Nice. And finally, is there anything that we didn't talk about or I didn't ask you about that you wanted to talk about today?
Oh, my goodness, no. I mean, I can't thank you enough, Steve, for the opportunity to talk about the book. My goal is that everybody who needs a resource like this will find it, and your audience and the availability that you've given me through appearing on your show is just, I can't thank you enough. I don't have the words.
Well, I know how you can thank me enough.
Oh, okay, good.
You sent me a couple of the chapters, sort of like a sneak peek, but when the book is done, will you send me a copy?
Oh, you will get an autographed copy, sir.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And that will be thanks enough.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. I don't need any thanks. I will take the book, though. Kimberly Ewertz, it has been such a pleasure talking with you today. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day and your hectic COVID-filled schedule to hang out and let us get to know you a little bit better on Fascination Street. I really, really appreciate that.
Well, I enjoyed taking the walk down Fascination Street with you, Steve.
Awesome. And you have a great rest of your day.
You do the same. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.
As always, thanks for listening, Streetwalkers. And don't forget, follow the show on Twitter at FascinationSTPD, on Instagram at Fascination Street Pod. Follow the podcast page on Facebook at Fascination Street Podcast. And of course, you can always email me at fascinationstreetpod@gmail.com. And if you haven't already, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button and rate us on iTunes. Opening music is the song Magnolia from the 2014 album Intransigence, used with permission from Douglas Miles Clark. Closing music is Apollo from the 2001 album Into the Known by the band Sapphire. Thanks for hanging out with us and getting to know a little bit about our guest. We'll see you next time on Fascination Street.